How is it going, everyone? I want to talk a story that's making the rounds and certainly has some people a little bit worried about some of our favorite games if you're a fan of JRPGs, and that is Metaphor ReFantazio, Persona, and the future of those titles. I don't think we need to batten down the hatches and think that it's over for these series, but certainly this is something worth talking about, and I've been seeing a lot of people on social media be a little bit skeptical or even a little bit worried about the futures of these franchises, but I wouldn't, again, get too worried. I mean, if you want to talk about some of the games and studios with the best output in terms of their track record, the Persona team is exactly that, and those styles of games have been received incredibly well. Would I like to see their games a little bit more consistently? Not have 9 years in between Persona 5 and Persona 6, or however long it's gonna end up being? Yeah, absolutely. But when these games do come out, they're usually pretty outstanding. As noted on The Outer Haven, Katsura Hashino did an interview with Game Informer talking a little bit about the future of Metaphor, Persona, and Atlus as a whole, noting that they need to grow the JRPG genre in some way if they're to reach even more people. It was noted more so than just latching onto a specific genre of game, we're going back to how we can evolve our JRPG and what it looks like. For us, it's coming to a turning point where we want to really take it to the next level in terms of how our JRPGs are. Of course, we want to retain our strengths, whether that be our narrative or elements that make us JRPGs. With these changing times, we do feel the need to update our format and create games that would be more widely playable, not just within the JRPG realm, but something that would be easier, more accessible for a wider audience. We're hoping to update our format with that in mind. Now, I know a lot of people are going to read some of that terminology, accessibility, easier, wider audience, some of those terms are gonna be like, oh my god, my beloved Persona is gonna be changing. However, you can look at it in a different way. And first of all, let's tackle that aspect of taking Atlus to the next level and growing Persona and Metaphor in these styles of games. Guys, I think Persona is right there. I think it is so close to breaking out, and if it already hasn't broken out, which you can certainly make the argument it has, but I think Persona 6, not the Persona 4 remake, not Persona 3 Reload, but once Persona 6 comes out, it is going to be an absolute juggernaut of a release because it's the newest mainline entry in the Persona series. It's gonna be coming off the heels of these games that are received so well in Metaphor, which I still believe got robbed 2024 Game of the Year, but nonetheless, it was for a lot of people, myself included, our 2024 Game of the Year. And coming off the heels of the success of Persona 5, and those games were so big, but even though there haven't been new titles released super consistently, remakes, Persona 3 Reload, Persona 4 is getting a remake, they'll be relatively big. The buzz around Persona and the perception of that franchise has only grown, especially with the game now being available on more platforms. For a long time with Persona 5 Royal, it was only available on PlayStation and Persona 5 when it initially came out. Persona 6 is going to be available on a bevy of platforms, Switch 2, PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox, even though that doesn't really matter much, but nonetheless, it's going to be available on a ton of platforms where it's going to do a lot better than Persona 5, and on top of that, the perception of the franchise has just grown exponentially, and people have over the years checked out these games that maybe, a lot of people really love these games, but maybe they weren't big enough for them to immediately check out the remake of Persona 3 or a remake of Persona 4, or they played those games in the past, so on and so forth. But once Persona 6 comes out, it is going to be a gigantic title. Now, there are a couple of changes that I would like to see be made. As these franchises are getting bigger in the West, I would like them to age up the characters a little bit more, make it a college setting, just make it so I feel like that aspect is going to make it more engaging for a Western audience and people just in general. Honestly, I think if you do college-age Persona, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because thematically, these games get super dark. Like, Persona 5, right off the rip, got really dark. So I just think a college setting would make it more accessible and make people want to check it out a little bit more. But beyond that, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel, and I think sometimes, reinventing the wheel a little bit too much can have its consequences. Like, I loved Final Fantasy 16, but but that game is like a straight action game, and people certainly had their issues with it. With Persona, I think completely trying to reinvent what Persona is, if you take it to an action-heavy route or something like that, and Persona Musou can exist with like P5 Strikers, I have no problem with that as like a spin-off title, but for the core franchise, I do think it's important to retain the fundamentals, and I think now that people are just willing to play these games more than in 2008 when Persona 4 came out in stateside, or even 2017 when Persona 5 came out on the PlayStation 3, I think more people have just been exposed to these kinds of games, and I feel like they've just been naturally growing. Guys, as far as publicly available data is concerned, Metaphor ReFantazio is the most concurrently played Steam JRPG of all time. Literally of all time. And that is a game that I feel like was received so well that people have gone back and checked it out, and now that's a notable IP as well. And I think Persona 6, once that ultimately does come out, it will absolutely trounce Metaphor's numbers by orders of magnitude. I think it will be significantly bigger, and maybe even if we want to talk Steam concurrent player count, you know, 1.52x as far as that's concerned. That's how confident I am in Persona 6 being a gigantic release. I don't really see Persona 4 Revival getting to that level. I don't think Persona 4 Revival's goal should be breaking like 50k concurrent players, because Persona 3 Reload was like 40k, and Persona 4, much like Persona 3, is gonna be on Game Pass. So as far as that Steam data set goes, that should be the number they should be aiming for. But with Persona 6, I could easily see that game breaking, you know, 110, 120k, and again, for a JRPG, that's a really healthy number, especially for a game that you think is going to cost $70, and obviously it's going to sell really well on PlayStation 5, and that's probably going to be the dominant platform, and also, it'll do very well on Switch too, albeit, you know, the Persona 3 Reload port left a lot to be desired on the Switch too, but hopefully by the time P6 comes out, that'll be improved, and with Persona 6, you would hope that it'll be a simultaneous release on the Switch too as well. So, I know that some of these statements, that's going to inspire a lot of skepticism and people worried. I don't think they are looking to reinvent the wheel of Persona, and I think the franchise has been steadily growing. Is it gonna become like an explosion in popularity overnight? No, I think this is one of those franchises, as the years go on, it's gonna slowly get bigger and bigger, and then one day it is going to be one of the bigger IPs in gaming, and that's considering if it's not there yet. I think a lot of people would consider Persona already at that level. And remember, Metaphor only got one game so far. I get that it came off the heels of, you know, it being compared to the Persona games and being of a different setting, but still by that team, and that inherently will have people excited. But I think if you do another Metaphor game, which they've said, you know, that's an IP they value, but it'll probably be a while and they're gonna take their time with that, which I totally understand. Persona 6 should really be the big announcement, hopefully by the end of this year, and I would imagine that you can't do the announcement of Persona 6 until Persona 4 Revival comes out, because generally you don't want to simultaneously promote two games that are of a similar style with Persona 4 Revival and Persona 6, so I would imagine hopefully Persona 4 Revival is out by the end of the year. I know a lot of people are speculating 27 for that one, but maybe by the end of this year, if it's out in September, October, and then you can set up for Persona 6 in 2027. 2027 would mark, I believe, 11 years since Persona 5 initially came out, and that is more than anything the issue of Persona growing as an IP. It comes down to the franchise almost passively growing. I get that they're doing remakes, but in terms of mainline entries, like 11 years in between mainline entries is just insanity. And sometimes we go crazy about games having 5-year development cycles. You're talking about 11 years in between games, and I'm not saying that they didn't do anything in between that time, but that's a long time, and that'll obviously slow down the growth to an extent. You know, they had Metaphor, they've had these remakes, and that certainly helped, but I think for the mainline titles, it would help if games aren't, I'm not saying they're out every other year, but maybe every 5, 6, 7 years and not 11 years, so that's my 2 cents on that. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. I think the franchise is fine. I think Persona 6 is going to be an absolute juggernaut, and hopefully they'll do some stuff with Metaphor. Metaphor port to Switch 2 makes all the sense in the world, so on and so forth. That'll do it for me. Sound off down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.